Hey everyone, it's Stephanie with Stephanie Rado Photography. So I wanted to jump on and show you how to do the World in the Eye composite and try to go through a little tutorial on how to achieve that. I do not know who the original photographer is who came up with that concept. I know that someone had done this photo and it was really circulating around social media, so a lot of people did different takes on it. I thought it would be kind of a fun tutorial to show you how you can do it yourself, for those who aren't sure how. I actually had this set up, and this is my second time recording this. I had everything saved step by step on how to do this so we can just fly through this. And of course, my laptop died in the middle of me recording, and I didn't save that file. I'm just so frustrated. So anyways, I'm kind of pulled up couple different things. We're going to go through this step by step on what I did to achieve the final image, and we'll kind of do my best explaining everything. So first things first, what I did here, I knew that I wanted to use this side of her face and this side of the tree more so than the other side of the dumpster. I did actually, to begin with, before I cropped the image down, I actually selected this side here. I copied and pasted it. I then flipped it, and I went through and photoshopped that over here just to get rid of the dumpster. I ended up deciding that I wanted to use the left side of the image instead of the right, so I didn't even have to worry about that. From here, first things first, when looking at my children, they naturally have a little bit smaller eyes, especially when smiling, and they were blessed with my squinty eyes. So I knew the first thing I actually wanted to do was make her eye a little bit bigger, the eye that I was planning on using. So I went through and I selected it. I pressed Command C, I'm using a Mac, and Command V to paste it. I then went in and I made her eye a little bit bigger. So pretty much where I was happy. I think that was about the right size of where I had it before. If you're not familiar with masks, you then go down here. You add a mask onto that layer. You take your brush. That layer is white. I am then going to take my black brush, and I'm going to make my brush smaller, add 100% opacity, go through and erase this, square that I've essentially created. I don't want to hit her lashes at all. And we're going to go through and just, actually I'm going to invert that and go back and paint that back. But make sure all of that's good. So once I have that where I want it, I'm going to zoom back out. I think I like that size of her eye. So this is what we did. We just made her eye a little bit bigger. You obviously don't have to do that. That's a style preference. I wanted to, so that's what I did. From here, I believe I just cropped my image to, get to where I wanted it to be. I'm going to zoom in here. I'm going to drag this over. I knew I wanted it to be directly in the middle of her face. So I went through, zoomed in to make sure I'm cropping at the right area, and cropped it, which I'm going to now flip over to this one here. So as you can see, I then have my cropped image. Her eye's larger, cropped image. I wanted to make her eye a little bit brighter and to clean that up a little bit. So you can go through with your curves. I just brightened that. From here, I just literally raised those shadows a little bit, and then I painted that onto just her eye. So again, you have your curves layer, raise that. I probably inverted it by pressing Command Delete. Take your white brush, because you're then on a black, and you just paint it where you want it lighter. I took a world image from Google. I think that's what everyone else did. So essentially, I took my selection tool, selected just her eye. You know, I zoomed way in, made sure it did not include any of the white. It was just this here. I then took the world and by holding Option, you can clip that into this mask. So obviously if I didn't have that clipped, I just have this eye over this. I went through it and I clipped it on there. From there, I actually lowered that opacity all the way about, and I came back in here and I took my black brush and I went over right here, over the edges with a real soft, I probably had that opacity down real low and went over it until I felt like it was good. So then that way when I have my world and I bring it back up to the opacity I wanted it at, you can still see the outline of her eye. So that is essentially how you get the world into her eye. I then went through and to create the tear. So this was fun. I actually didn't know how to do this, so that was really fun for me to learn. What you're going to do, you're going to go to your background layer. You're going to create a new layer. We'll name this tier number 2. On this tier 2, you're going to take your paintbrush and you are actually just going to, at your 100% opacity, draw yourself a little tear. You know, white is fine. It doesn't necessarily need to be perfect. And again, like however you artistically feel like it's correct. I took the smudge, not that smudge tool. I took my soft brush, smudge tool here, and I just kind of dragged that a little bit and, you know, made it look like what I felt like was correct. Just to have that drawn up a little. So from here, you're going to then add the effects to it. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to where, with my tier, I'm going to go back to my effects. So I started off with my drop shadow. I chose the color shadow that I felt like was in her natural shadows of her skin tone. So you go here and you color drop what color you want and play around with that until you feel like it looks right. My opacity is at 51. So as you can see, that shadow and what that does and how dark it makes it, I felt like it looked good right in there. This angle, again, you want to see where the shadows are naturally falling from the light direction. Obviously, it wouldn't make sense to have a shadow looking, you know, totally different than where her light, like it wouldn't make sense to have it on this side. So I was pretty, you know, I kind of played around with it where I felt like it looked right. I think I had it about 133, 134 for this picture. A lot of this stuff you just have to like play with. My distance is at 5 pixels. Obviously, I don't want the shadow way off there. That wouldn't make sense. So it made sense for it to be at about 4 or 5. The spread is at 11%. Again, it would not make sense for it to be like this. So I'm going to bring that back down to where it was. And then the size. You know, this is kind of dispersing that out. Again, wouldn't make sense. So I'm going to go back to where it was. After you're done with your drop shadow and making those adjustments that work for your picture, you're going to go to this bevel and emboss. You're going to then, I took away the shadow because we already created it in the drop shadow. So I actually took away that shadow mode, lowered it to 100% or lowered it to 0. And I took this highlight all the way to 100 because I want that highlight to match that highlight on her nose. Again, I chose a little bit more of a skin color versus a white. That's up to you. This angle here is, again, where that highlight's going to hit. So this is 141 and 32. See the difference if I were to go down or if I were to go up, it's going to lessen that highlight. So I'm going to go back to my 141 and 32 because that's where I felt like it looked the best. You're going to go up here to this structure and, you know, again, really play with it to see what you feel looks right. My size is at 1. I was happy with that. Soften is at 5. You know, it could look, you know, better at, you know, just how harsh you want that highlight to look. I think it looks pretty good down here. Actually, I might even put it more towards like a 3 or a 4. And then your blending options, you know, I again here have my general blending, 100% opacity. That's, you know, I want that tier to show. My fill opacity, I don't want that to be filled because that's going to be that color that we originally painted it, and that makes no sense. So we're going to go down to 0. And that is how I created that tier. I then took, again, my paintbrush, and so I'm actually going to see if I can, okay, well, take your paintbrush and you can essentially continue that tier down or whatever you feel like fits your picture. You know, if I wanted to create a second tier, you know, and then you can take your smudge tool and you can be able to widen that at that base. Again, it's going to depend on your photo and how long you want your tier, what you want it, but that's how I then took my original little teardrop that I painted on, and I actually smeared it up into her eye, and I painted a little in there at a very low opacity to create that little watered, you know, look. So that is essentially how you create the world in the photo and how you create a tier. From there, I went through and I actually made the world I upped the saturation on the world. I cleaned up her skin a little bit. I added and used my dodge and burn techniques with her hair. This girl has some wild, crazy hair. And so I just went through and I dodged those shadows, brightened those highlights just to add that depth to her hair that I wanted. And added a few of my editing techniques that I do for my images. And then I ended up cropping it down a little bit more so that we could really see that it was a world in her eye. And that is what I ended up with. So I hope this helped you create, show you how you can create this image. I will have to look for the photographer who kind of started this trend and try to credit him or her so that they receive credit. But I hope that this tutorial kind of helped on how you can create it. And I would love for you to share your images here in the group so that we can see what everyone came up with. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll be talking with you all soon.